So we've got Councillor Ben Bradley, MP, leader of Nottinghamshire County Council, and last week there was a budget meeting at Nottinghamshire County Council when several announcements were made about what the money is going to be spent on your hard-earned council tax. And one of those announcements was the highway spend, big plans for the highway. So I've got a series of questions which has come in from my Facebook page and through email over the past few days, and I've got about a dozen questions to ask you. I couldn't ask you every single question. We're going to fire away with question number one. Is there a comprehensive plan for repairing our roads in Ashfield and Nottinghamshire?
Sure, yes. So one of the first things we did when I was elected as leader last year was we started a big root and branch review of literally every aspect, from how we actually fix the roads to every dry and boring backroom function that we do. We came up with 50 recommendations as to things we would change and do differently, which we're now implementing. So there is a proper plan, and the long and the short of it is effectively, as far as residents are interested, is that we're going to do long-term, better quality repairs as the first option rather than the emergency kind of bodge job. We still have to do a little bit of that because we have an emergency kind of procedure where we legally have to. But every time we have the option, we'll do a long-term, good quality repair, and we'll try and do the whole street at the same time.
So what do you say to people who say we've heard it all before?
So we've spent a long time chucking money at the problem and chucking money at the same old systems, and residents have always come back and said, you might be spending more, but you're still just chucking stuff in a hole and stomping on it.
Yeah.
We're not anymore. We're changing the way that we do it, and as I say, the first option is going to be that long-term patching or resurfacing. We're literally going to double the number of teams who are doing that work, and that's the big investment this week.
Excellent. So the £50 million, which was spoke about last week, it was all over the newspapers, social media, on the TV. Where is that from, and how is it going to be shared out amongst the different districts in Nottinghamshire, and what is that amount on top of?
So last question first. The annual budget for highways is just over 20 million quid. We put a load extra into it in the last 4 years, but I don't think we got the systems right. We weren't doing the right kind of repairs, so we've not seen the benefit that we'd like, which is why that review is so important. So that 15 million quid is over the next 3 years, on top of the 20 odd million pound that we currently spend. Most of it will go on the patching that we talked about, so 12 million goes on doubling the capacity of the teams that we have to do those long-term patching works, and the rest does some other things that are the impact on the highway, so things like drainage. Where we've got drainage wrong, it breaks up the surface of the highway and all the rest of it. So there's some other peripheral things as well. In terms of how it's shared out, everything across the county is done on mileage of road, so every mile of road gets the same amount of funding. Okay. But what this additional funding will do, we're going to do it slightly differently. So the second half, the doubling of the teams, we're going to use that more strategically. The bit that residents complain about the most, and the bit that statistically we're not as good at, are those residential streets, the bit people see every day outside their house. So those teams are going to do those residential streets and make sure we're doing a good quality job.
Now, some people may say, and I've been guilty of this in the past, that Ashfield has got the worst roads in the country. Now, is that true?
No, it's frustrating, and I know everyone thinks we've got terrible roads. To be honest, it's not great across the country. It's a national problem. We're no worse than anybody else, in all honesty. And actually, when the figures have come out around the bottom 10 worst counties, we're not on that list. So we're not anywhere near the bottom. That said, doesn't mean we're good, right? So there's a lot more work we can do, and that's why the highways plan was really important. But actually, last year, the last one it was measured was 2020, we did more repairs than anywhere else in the country.
Wow. So this one's caused a few problems for me locally in Ashfield over the past week. Now, the Ashfield Independents are claiming that you voted against an additional £15 million for highways in favour of more council officers in Limby. Is this true?
The Ashfield Independents can't do maths. It's not true. So we need to do both. And the point of the office accommodation in Limby is two things. One, bringing services to where they're needed, right, closer to local people. Ashfield Independents have argued for a long time everything's centred in West Bridgeford. Well, it won't be. It'll be centred in Hucknall, in the middle of the county, in terms of delivering our services, and better for Hucknall residents, as well as the jobs and impact on the town centre and everything that will have. But actually, from a potholes perspective, it's that change that will fund our potholes. So potholes is funded from the revenue budget, the day-to-day spending budget. We spend a lot of money at the minute on big empty buildings, particularly post-COVID, where people are working at home. There's nobody in. We don't need all those buildings. We're going to sell a lot of them. We're going to move out. And we're going to build something that's energy efficient, that is more modern, better for people to use the services, and saves us £1.5 million a year, which can be reinvested in highways.
So let's get this right then. So the new council offices are, it looks like they're going to be built in Hucknall, which is actually in Ashfield, in the Ashfield district, and that will generate how many jobs for the local area? Or bring jobs into the area, should I say?
Good question. I haven't got a number off the top of my head. It will bring though that employment into Hucknall, so Topwigate. It's strictly speaking just over into Gedling, but it's right on the edge of Hucknall. And those staff will have obviously come in and out of Hucknall Town Centre and use those services. We're also going to move some of our services that are currently delivered, as you say, from West Bridgeford or from other sites that will be so much more accessible to residents in Hucknall as well. And the other option, of course, if we don't build those office blocks there, it probably ends up as housing, which I'm sure residents wouldn't want either.
Yeah, I think actually that's better than housing.
Yeah,
I mean, I would, you know, to have that sort of office facility. We've seen the impact in Ashfield actually when we moved Ashfield homes out of Sutton Town Centre, we moved them back to Kirkby. It's had a devastating effect on the town centre. Less people working in the town centre, less people spending money in the town centre. So if you're bringing more people to work and socialise in Hucknall, I'm surely that's got to be a good thing and better than housing.
Yeah, and money-wise, right, we're doing a lot of work to get rid of our empty properties to make sure that we're fit for kind of hybrid working and everything else. That means smaller office accommodation, and it means different kinds of accommodation, right? We want to be greener, we want cheaper bills, so we can work from fewer buildings that are more energy efficient, where we're spending less money, and all that can be reinvested in services. Okay,
so there's another myth, I think it is, that's been flying about over the past week. A district councillor in Hucknall has done some media, I think it was in the Dispatch, suggesting that Ashfield's libraries, Nottinghamshire libraries as well, may face closure. Will we see any library closures?
No, and it's really frustrating because I've shared the clip on my Facebook today of countless members in our meeting, including the people in charge of libraries, standing up and saying we absolutely will not close any libraries. Guarantee you that over the next 3 years of our administration, and it's up to whoever wins the election, right? But we absolutely guarantee that no libraries will close. If we've got opportunities to invest in facilities, to move into better facilities within the same locality, fine, we'll have a look, but no area will lose their library.
So Ben, you used to be an Ashfield District Councillor with myself. Ashfield has got the highest council tax in Nottinghamshire. So why is council tax being increased again? That's both at county and at district.
Well, obviously Ashfield have also got, I think, the highest council and member allowances in the county as well.
Yes, they
so
have.
There's a correlation. Look, from a county council perspective, cost of living is a challenge. Absolutely recognise it. We've got lots of pressures. So the thing that districts and boroughs don't have to do, that we do, are the really acute services where we can't manage the need. We can't decide how many children need care, how many adults need social care. We just have to deliver the service, and that's where the big budget pressure comes from. But when inflation is sitting at 6-7%, we're raising council tax by 1%. We're trying to take that hit on behalf of residents, and it funds things like the key priorities they've asked us to do, like the highways budget, as well as things like social care.
Excellent. So we've touched on how the income from the rising council tax will be what it will be spent on. Let's go back to a district level. You as a group leader at Ashfield District Council for the Conservative Party, the additional income raised at local level, at district level, where's that going to be spent? And will some of it be spent, for example, servicing the debt that they've got?
Yeah, Ashfield's a real challenge. It's not the only one, but the figures around where, and we talked about in the budget meeting last week, where Ashfield are going to end up spending their money. I think it's by 23-24 financial year, they're going to be spending 35% of their annual revenue, so that's the money that funds the services, on repaying debt. That's massive amounts of money. If you compare, so that's more than 3 times what we spend at the county council. I would think it was getting on for double what the city council spend on their debt, and they're in special measures pretty much. So it's not pretty.
So will Nottinghamshire County Council become a combined authority, and what would that mean for the county?
Yes, we've been talking a lot about devolution. Levelling Up White Paper says that government's going to give money and additional decision-making powers to areas that tick their boxes in terms of structure. For us, what that means is working more closely with Derby and Derbyshire on our, not necessarily public services, but on the economy stuff, right? Transport, private sector investment, what jobs we can create in the region. Wouldn't make a great deal of difference to the structures of our councils, but it means things like the LEP, if people know about that, the local enterprise partnership that engage with business in the private sector, that stuff will get rolled into a different structure, and we'll hopefully have that kind of figurehead like a Ben Houchin in Teesside, who is that go-to person where private sector want to invest to create jobs.
Yeah.
That's who you go and talk to, and you can make it happen.
Okay. Would having a combined authority, which we've just spoken about, undermine district and borough councils?
No, so we want them to have a really strong part in it. In order to make it work, that combined authority, if we have a mayor, they'll have powers in things like housing and planning. We need district and boroughs to be engaged in that. Nobody's taking any powers off of district and boroughs, and it's frustrating that some people keep suggesting that we might be. But actually, I keep reaching out to all of those leaders. I meet every week with district and borough leaders across the county and say, come and get you involved, come and tell us what you think about it and how you want to be engaged in it. So
and do they get involved?
Most of them do.
Okay. So we're back onto potholes now, Ben, and highways. What is being done to make sure that the future repairs on potholes are long term?
Yeah, so we had this highways review. We've changed the way that we're going to implement all of our changes. There are some times where we have legal requirements that we have to go and fix something very quickly, where you might see emergency repairs.
Yeah.
But the vast majority of the time, we want to be doing long-term repairs. We want to be doing a whole street at once, so we're not coming back the week later to do the next pothole along. We're going to patch the whole lot. And then at the end of all that, or before all that, we're going to communicate better with residents. So you know when your street's going to get done, you know what's going to happen, and we're going to be much better at putting all that across.
Now, see, sometimes certain councils will suggest that you spend more money in places like West Bridgford, but what they don't take into account, we've got a lot of bridges in West Bridgford that cross over the River Trent, and you know, correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, that's a statutory requirement. Then bridges must be maintained. And does that come out of the same budget?
The wider highways budget, yeah. So those that go across the Trent, largely jointly with us in the city, we have legal duties where we've got to maintain these things. But in terms of miles of road, every mile of road gets exactly the same amount of money allocated to it, whether it's in Ashfield or West Bridgford.
I guess what I was getting at, there will be a little bit more money spent in West Bridgford because of the bridges.
Well, there's a little bit of money spent in or anywhere where there's major infrastructure on the highway is going to be a bit more expensive.
Okay. So, are there any quality checks regarding the work that's been done on each pothole that is repaired?
Yes, and sometimes a bit hit and miss. We've seen in the past some videos that have been shared that aren't good at all. And sometimes that's subcontractors or where we do it ourselves through VIA, which is our organisation that delivers that road work. It's all quality assured, and one of the things, as I say, through the highways review is we're changing the way that we manage that to make sure that we are meeting that expectation every single time.
So one thing I do get a lot of complaints about, if we've got a pothole, we sometimes see a couple of blokes turn up with a bag of cold tarmac, they just sling it in a hole, stamp on it, or run the back tyre over it. Is that going to stop?
Mega frustrating, isn't it? So we're changing the way we do things. Sometimes we've got to do what they call via fix, which is an emergency repair. So if the hole's a certain level deep or wide, we have to fix it within 24 hours. You've got to get out and do it, which sometimes means you chuck stuff in a hole and cover it up because it's a legal duty. But unless it's our legal duty to do it within 24 hours, we don't want to do that. We want to go and do the full patching and get it right. So it might mean sometimes if you've got a street that's checkered with potholes and there's plenty of them around, instead of coming out to fix that one emergency one, we might take an extra week or two to plan it in, but we'll come and we'll do the whole lot and we'll resurface it, and that's going to be the first port of call, rather than in the past it's been a case of just go and do it quick. Now we're saying, well, if it takes us a little bit longer, we'll go and do it properly. Yeah,
I think most people accept that. So the problem of potholes in Ashfield, not just Ashfield, it's all in Nottinghamshire, has been an issue for many years. So why has this problem existed for so long?
Well, truth be told, like I say, it's a national problem. And I said in the budget meeting last week, if this was a private sector asset, right, it's a £10 billion asset, our highways, in Nottinghamshire alone, you would spend about £500 million a year on that. If you were a private sector company and they were your buildings or your assets that you wanted to maintain, our budget's 20. So it's a real challenge to try and keep up, and that means you've got to get it spot on, kind of tactically and technically to manage it. It's been underfunded, and no matter whose budget you want to take, I could sit and change the numbers around on our spreadsheet in the budget meeting. Wouldn't get close to 500 million quid. So that means we've got to get the system right and the structures right and the techniques right, which is what our highways review is about. So hopefully we'll make some inroads.
So let's just, I think my final question, or one of my final questions, Ben, is let's go back to last week's vote, where opposition parties were saying that you voted against £15 million extra being spent on our roads. I mean, that was an amendment. It wasn't a full motion, it was an amendment on a motion. you just explain how that amendment works, and sometimes the mischief opposition parties get up to with amendments. So we've all been guilty of it.
Yeah, it's just dead easy when you're in opposition, because you don't have to actually think through the consequences of anything, right? So every year at budget meetings, oppositions come and they basically take a chunk out of your reserve, which is what we would spend on, if there was a social care crisis, we'd have to spend money from that reserve. You take a bit out of the reserve and you whack it on some priority spending, so you can say we would spend more, and they've rejected spending more, which is what happened last week. So they want to take money out of Topway Gate and that investment in buildings, which in reality would lose us £1.5 million a year in the money that we need to do potholes. And instead they voted against our motion, which would have put 15 million extra into that budget. It's all political games, but it's dead easy in opposition to just wave the numbers around, isn't it? Not really have to think about how it would work.
Like I say, in opposition, we've probably all been guilty of some political game playing in the past. But yeah, I mean, that's the truth of it. I absolutely get it. So I think that's it. Thank you for your time, Ben. It's been, I know your time's precious. And we're down here in Westminster as well, and we're about to go and vote. So I'm going to log off now. So if you've got any more questions about the highways, please email me on lee.anderson.mp@parliament.uk, and I will fire them off to Ben, and I'm sure we'll get a full and honest answer.